The stars looked different from the bridge of the Resilience. Captain Doyon Kim stood with his hands behind his back, watching the display screens show thousands of distant suns. His ship was small compared to the massive vessels of older alien races, but it was humanity's pride. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 30 years ago, and most aliens still treated humans like children who needed to learn their place. The communications officer turned in her chair. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal. It's weak, coming from inside the Kelos Nebula." Doyon walked to her station. "Can you identify the vessel?" "It's Velterran, sir. Their life support is failing. They're asking for immediate assistance." Dr. Yoonji Park, the ship's chief scientist, looked up from her datapad. "The Velthera are artists and historians. They have no military, no resources that matter to the big powers." Lieutenant Minho Choi checked his tactical display. "Captain, command is sending a message. They're advising us to log the distress call and continue our survey mission. They say helping the Veltherans would use too much of our supplies." Doyon was quiet for a moment. The nebula's swirling gases filled the view screen, beautiful and dangerous. Inside that cosmic storm, people were dying. People who had done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place when pirates attacked their ship. "How long to reach them?" he asked. Minho hesitated. 6 hours at maximum speed." "But sir, command specifically said—" "I heard what command said, Lieutenant. I asked how long to reach them." 6 hours, sir." Doyon turned to the helm officer. "Set course for the distress signal. Maximum speed." The crew moved instantly. They knew their captain. Doyon had grown up in a fishing village where neighbors helped neighbors, where you didn't ask what someone could pay before you pulled them from the water. The galaxy operated differently, but Doyon had never learned to think like the galaxy. Yoonji stepped beside him as the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. "This could cause problems with command. The Council won't like it either. The Velthara can't offer anything in return." "Then it's a good thing I'm not asking for anything in return," Doyon said quietly. 6 hours later, the Resilience dropped out of faster-than-light travel into chaos. The Velteran ship was drifting, its hull torn open in 3 places. Debris floated around it like a cloud. Minho's scans showed life signs, but they were fading. "Get me a communication line," Doyon ordered. The screen flickered and showed an alien face. The Velteran had large eyes and skin that shimmered with faint colors. She looked exhausted and afraid. "This is Elder Historian Thilmara. Our ship was attacked. We tried to call for help, but no one answered. Are you here to rescue us?" "This is Captain Doyon Kim of Earth's ship Resilience. Yes, we're here to help." "How many are aboard?" 247 souls. Thilmara's voice broke. "We've been drifting for 8 hours. Life support will fail in less than 2 hours." Doyon turned to his crew. "Yoonji, get your medical team ready. Minho, prepare the shuttle bays. We're taking everyone aboard." For the next 18 hours, the crew of the Resilience worked without stopping. They brought Velterans across on shuttles, 3 dozen at a time. The ship's medical bay filled with injured aliens. The crew gave up their own quarters so the refugees would have places to sleep. Engineers worked in the damaged Velteran ship, trying to repair it enough to reach the nearest station. Doyon didn't sleep. He walked through his ship, checking on the Velterans, making sure they had food and water. Many of them touched his hand as he passed, their way of showing gratitude. Some were crying. Most looked at him with confusion, as if they couldn't understand why strangers would help them. On the second day, Thilmara found him in the cargo bay, where he was helping set up temporary sleeping areas. "Captain Kim, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Elder Historian." She studied his face with those large, expressive eyes. "Why did you come for us?" "My people have nothing to trade. No technology you need. No resources. No political power in the Council. We are artists and keepers of stories. In the galaxy's economy, we are worth nothing." Doyon set down the blanket he was holding. "Elder Historian, let me tell you about Earth. On my world, we have an old saying. It doesn't translate perfectly, but it means that the worth of a person isn't measured by what they own or what they can give back. It's measured by the fact that they exist. Your people were in danger. We could help. That's all the reason we needed." Thilmara's colors shifted to deep blue, which Yoonji had explained was how Velterans showed strong emotion. "In 3,000 years of traveling the stars, my people have never met anyone like you. The great powers ignore us because we offer them nothing, but you came because we needed help. That is a wisdom my people thought lost in the galaxy." "It's not wisdom," Doyon said. It's just being decent. 3 days later, the Resilience escorted the repaired Velteran ship to the nearest station. Thilmara stood on the bridge one last time before her people departed. She placed both her hands on Doyen's shoulders, a gesture of deepest respect among her kind. Captain Doyen Kim of Earth. The Velthara are a people of memory. We remember every story, every song, every kindness shown to us across 3,000 years. What you have done will be recorded in our most sacred archives. Your name will be taught to our children's children. The Velthara never forget, Doyen smiled. Neither do humans, Elder Historian. That's why we stopped. The Velterans departed. The Resilience returned to Earth, where Captain Doyen received an official reprimand from Command for wasting resources and ignoring orders. Ambassador Jiwan Lee stood before the Galactic Council and endured lectures about efficiency and appropriate conduct for newer species. The Velthara sent formal thanks to the Council, which was politely acknowledged and filed away. The galaxy moved on. Bigger species had bigger concerns. The rescue of 247 Velterans was a footnote in a busy year. But in the sacred archives of Velthar Prime, in a building made of living crystal that stored memories, a new entry was made. It told the story of Captain Doyen Kim and the humans who came when no one else would. The story was sealed in crystal that would last 10,000 years. The galaxy forgot about the rescue within weeks. The Velthara never forgot, and neither did humanity. 137 years passed. The galaxy turned. Species rose and fell. Wars were fought. Treaties were signed. The rescue of 247 Velterans remained a small story, known only to those who studied such things. But small stories have a way of becoming important. Seeds planted in one generation grow into trees that shelter the next. And sometimes when the galaxy is dark and cruel, those trees bear fruit that changes everything. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 hours. Admiral Sora Han watched the holographic display showing what remained of the greatest military fleet ever assembled. Numbers kept updating as search and rescue teams found more wreckage. Each new number was worse than the last. 89,000 ships destroyed, the Kryn Council representative stated. His voice was flat, emotionless. The Voidborn swept through our formation like it was nothing. They don't just destroy ships. They drain all power from them. Reactors go cold in seconds. Life support fails. The crew freezes or suffocates in the dark. Admiral Sora had seen the battle recordings. She had watched proud warships that had defended their worlds for centuries become dark, lifeless hulls drifting in space. The Voidborn were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced. They looked like tears in space itself, dark wounds in reality that consumed everything around them. How many Voidborn were destroyed? Someone asked. 3, the Kryn representative answered. We lost 89,000 ships to destroy 3 of them. Our intelligence suggests there are more than 10,000 Voidborn entities active. The chamber fell silent. The mathematics were simple and terrible. The galaxy didn't have enough ships to win this war. Chancellor Hyun Woo-nam sat in the human delegation area, listening without expression. He was old now, 73 years, but his mind was still sharp. He had spent his entire adult life in galactic politics and knew how this would go. The Supreme Council leader stood, her multiple arms spreading in a gesture that called for attention. We must face reality. The Voidborn cannot be stopped, only slowed. We must choose which worlds to defend and which to abandon. We do not have the resources to save everyone. Dr. Yuna Shin, sitting behind Chancellor Hyunwoo, leaned forward. She was humanity's top physicist, and she understood what was being said. They're going to pick which species live and which die. The next 4 days were filled with calculations and debates. Scientists projected the Voidborn's path through the galaxy. Military leaders counted available ships and defensive positions. Politicians argued about which worlds mattered most. A list was created. Worlds were ranked by population, industrial capacity, military strength, and political importance. The top 300 systems would receive full defensive fleets. Another 500 would get partial protection. The rest would be offered evacuation ships for a percentage of their population. The rest would be left to die. Captain Junho Park stood in the observation gallery, watching the politicians decide who deserved to live. He was the grandson of Dr. Yoonji Park, who had served on the Resilience 137 years ago. He had grown up hearing her stories about Captain Doyen and the Velteran rescue. They're putting the Velthara on the abandonment list, his aide said quietly. Velthar Prime has 6.7 billion people. The council is offering evacuation for 200,000. Junho felt something cold settle in his chest. 3%. They're saving 3% and leaving the rest. On the council floor, Elder Keeper Silmara stood to speak. She was the great-granddaughter of Thilmara, the historian who had been saved by Captain Doyen. Like all Veltarans, she remembered every story passed down through her family. Honored council, I speak not to challenge your mathematics, but to remind you of something you may have forgotten. 137 years ago, when my people were dying in space, the galaxy ignored our calls for help. But one ship came, a human ship called Resilience. Its captain, Doyen Kim, saved all 247 of my ancestors when they could offer nothing in return. She looked directly at the council leader. The galaxy operates on rules of debt and payment. Most species here formally recognize the principle that great kindnesses create obligations. I ask now for the council to honor that debt. Protect Velthar Prime. Give us the same chance humanity gave us 137 years ago. The debate lasted 4 hours. Species after species stood to speak. Some supported the Veltharans. Most did not. The arguments were logical and reasonable. Velthar Prime had no strategic value. The Velthara had no military to contribute. Defending their world would require thousands of ships that were needed elsewhere. Moral debts were admirable, but they couldn't override survival. In the end, the vote was clear. Velthar Prime would receive evacuation ships for 200,000 citizens. The rest would be left behind. The Voidborn would arrive in approximately 18 months. Chancellor Hyunwoo had sat silent through the entire debate. When the vote concluded, he stood slowly. The chamber quieted. Humanity had become influential in the council over the decades, though still not as powerful as the ancient species. I have no arguments to present, Hyunwoo said. Your mathematics are correct. Your logic is sound. I understand your decision completely. He collected his documents and walked toward the exit. As he reached the door, he stopped and turned back. For the record, humanity notes this decision. We require no further discussion on this matter. Then he left. The council returned to other business, relieved that the humans hadn't caused a scene. They should have paid more attention to what Hyunwoo didn't say. 48 hours later, every human military base in the galaxy activated emergency protocols. Ships that had been in dock for repairs launched early. Reserve fleets were called to active duty. Colony defense forces received orders to report to staging areas immediately. Admiral Sora stood in the command center on Earth's orbital station, watching the fleet assemble. She had been given command of something called Operation Payback. The orders were simple and impossible. Defend Velthar Prime long enough to evacuate every single one of its 6.7 billion inhabitants. The council is sending angry messages, her communications officer reported. They want to know what we're doing. They're calling this a dangerous waste of resources. Tell them we're repaying a debt, Sora said, and stop accepting their calls. Chancellor Hyunwoo appeared on every human world's communication networks at once. His face was calm, but his words carried weight. Citizens of Earth and all human colonies, today I stand before you to speak of memory and honor. 137 years ago, a Veltaran ship was dying in space. Captain Doyen Kim and the crew of the Resilience saved 247 Veltarans when no one else would. The galaxy has now decided that the Velthara don't matter enough to save. They are offering to rescue 200,000 from a population of 6.7 billion. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Humanity rejects this decision. We will save all 6.7 billion Veltarans. We will defend their world against the Voidborn for as long as necessary to evacuate every last person. This is not a request for volunteers. This is not a political statement. This is who we are. This is what it means to be human. Within 12 hours, something unprecedented happened across human space. 847 privately owned ships were volunteered for evacuation duty. Former military personnel re-enlisted by the tens of thousands. Colony worlds voted to send their defense fleets. Mining companies offered their cargo haulers. Passenger ship owners sacrificed their businesses. Dr. Yuna brought her research to Admiral Sora 3 days into the mobilization. We've been working on something. We call it Project Sunspear. She showed Sora the data. For 30 years, human scientists had been researching exotic matter weapons. The Voidborn consumed energy, so normal weapons didn't work well. But Yuna's team had found something different. They could create weapons that fed the Voidborn too much energy too fast, making them essentially choke on their own consumption. Has it been tested? Sora asked. In simulation only. It should work. It might also tear holes in space-time. We can't be certain. Sora looked at the calculations. How many can we build? With all our resources? Maybe 40 arrays in the time we have. Build 60. I'll find the resources. Captain Junho led the volunteer force. 12,000 special operations personnel signed up for what everyone knew was a near-suicide mission. They would land on Velthar Prime and coordinate the largest evacuation in galactic history while the Voidborn advanced. The galaxy watched in disbelief. Some species called humanity crazy. Others called them inefficient. A few, very few, called them noble. Most just watched and calculated how much this would cost Earth. But humanity wasn't calculating costs. They were remembering a captain who had stopped to help when no one else would. They were remembering 247 strangers pulled from a dying ship 137 years ago. The Velthara remembered too. Elder Keeper Silamara stood on Velthar Prime's Capitol building and watched human ships begin to arrive. She wept, her skin shifting through colors that showed joy and sorrow and desperate hope. They came, she whispered. They actually came. Her aide stood beside her. Did you think they wouldn't? I hoped, but the galaxy has taught us not to expect miracles. Silmara looked up at the human ships filling her world's sky. Perhaps, she said quietly, we should have learned from humanity instead. The Velthar system had never seen so many ships. Admiral Sora Han stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching her fleet spread across space in layers. 4,200 human warships, arranged in what other species called a suicide formation. Behind them, thousands of transport vessels waited to carry 6.7 billion people to safety. 9 days until the Voidborn arrive, Lieutenant Commander Bora reported. All evacuation transports are in position. Ground teams are ready to begin. Sora studied the tactical display. 9 days to move an entire planet's population. The mathematics were brutal. Even working perfectly, they would need every single hour. Any delay would cost millions of lives. Begin evacuation operations, she ordered. On Velthar Prime's surface, Captain Junho Park stood in the capital city's main spaceport. Veltarans moved in organized streams toward transport ships. 12,000 human special operations personnel were spread across the planet, coordinating the largest evacuation in galactic history. We're moving 47 million per day, his second-in-command reported. That's ahead of schedule, but we need to maintain this pace for all 9 days. Junho watched families boarding transport ships. Parents carried children. The elderly helped each other walk. Every Veltaran carried a small pack of belongings, everything they could save from their entire lives. Their skin shifted through colors showing fear and sadness and hope. A young Veltaran girl approached him. She was perhaps 7 years old in human terms. Are you really going to save everyone? She asked. Junho knelt down to her level. Yes, every single person on your world will get on a ship. I promise you. Even if the dark things come, even if the dark things come. That's why all those ships are up there in space. They're going to keep the dark things away while you and your family get somewhere safe. The girl's colors shifted to pale yellow, which meant trust. She touched Junho's hand gently and then ran back to her mother. The mother looked at Junho with an expression that needed no translation. Thank you. Please don't fail. In space, Fleet Admiral Taejin O commanded the forward picket line. 400 ships, the smallest and fastest vessels humanity had brought. Their job was simple. Be the first to make contact with the Voidborn and buy time for everyone behind them. How do you feel about being bait? His tactical officer asked. Taejin smiled grimly. Honored. Every minute we buy saves thousands of people down there. Day 3 arrived with terrible news. The Voidborn were ahead of schedule. Instead of 9 days, humanity had 6. Admiral Sora received the report without emotion. She had learned long ago that emotion was a luxury commanders couldn't afford until after the battle. Inform all ships. Accelerate evacuation procedures. Ground teams. Increase loading rates by any means necessary. On Velthar Prime, Junho pushed his teams harder. The spaceports ran 24 hours without stopping. Some Veltarans waited in line for 8 hours before boarding. Nobody complained. They had seen the human ships in space and understood that people were about to die to give them these extra hours. Day 4. Fleet Admiral Tajin's picket line made first contact. The Voidborn appeared like wounds in space itself, dark tears in reality that seemed to pull light into them. Sensors screamed warnings. 27 Voidborn entities were advancing in a loose formation. All ships engage at maximum range, Tajin ordered. Stay spread out. Don't let them surround you. Human missiles launched by the thousands, energy weapons fired in coordinated volleys. For a few minutes it looked like they might actually damage the Voidborn. Then the entities began to feed. The first Voidborn reached the human ships and touched them with tendrils of darkness. The destroyer Swift Death went silent instantly. All power drained in seconds. Its crew had maybe 2 minutes before life support failure killed everyone aboard. All ships fall back pattern Delta, Tajin commanded. Keep them occupied. Make them chase us. For 14 hours and 17 minutes, 400 human ships played a deadly game with 27 Voidborn. They fired, retreated, fired again, led the entities on a chase through the outer system. Ships died one by one. The destroyer Rapid Fist, the cruiser Mountain Strong, the carrier Dawn Rising. Each death bought minutes. Tajin's flagship, the heavy cruiser Thunder Voice, was one of the last ships remaining.
40 ships left from the original 400.
The Voidborn had finally learned to stop chasing and were pushing forward as a group. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Tajin. Final stand positions. It's been an honor serving with you. The remaining ships formed a wall. They fired everything they had. The Voidborn advanced through the weapons fire like it was nothing, feeding on the energy. Tajin's last transmission was calm and clear. Time bought 14 hours, 17 minutes. Worth every second. The Thunder Voice went dark. The picket line fell silent. Admiral Sora received the news and continued her work. Morning would come later. Now there was only the mission. Second defensive line, prepare to engage. All ships, remember Tajin. The second line held for 22 hours. 698 ships bought those hours with their lives. The captains used every trick they could think of. They scattered and regrouped. They used the system's asteroid belt for cover. They fired at the Voidborn and then jumped away, forcing the entities to chase them across empty space. On Velthar Prime, half the population was evacuated. 3.3 billion people were safe. 3.4 billion remained. The transports worked without stopping, loading people as fast as physically possible. Junho barely slept. He moved between spaceports, solving problems, encouraging his teams, helping when loading slowed down. The Velterans remained remarkably calm. They trusted the humans completely, even as they watched the battle reports and knew what was happening in space. Day 4. The third defensive line was holding, but Admiral Sora could see it wouldn't last long enough. The Voidborn were learning. They were adapting to human tactics. What worked yesterday didn't work today. Deploy Sunspear, she ordered. Dr. Yuna Shin activated the weapons from her station on the Dauntless. 37 ships equipped with exotic matter arrays spread across space in a precise formation. Each ship was a node in a giant web of energy. At the center of that web were the Voidborn. Firing, Yuna said quietly. The Sunspear arrays released their payload. Exotic matter streamed into space, targeting the Voidborn's energy absorption fields. The entities began to feed like always, consuming the energy being thrown at them. Then something changed. The Voidborn began to glow, brighter and brighter. They were trying to consume the exotic matter, but it was too much, too fast, creating a feedback loop in their own systems. One Voidborn entity tried to stop feeding, but couldn't. The energy flow had become self-sustaining. 12 Voidborn imploded in cascading failures, their forms collapsing into points of light that then vanished completely. But there was a cost. 7 human ships caught at the wrong distance were hit by space-time distortions. They didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by the weapon's side effects. The remaining Voidborn stopped advancing. For the first time in the war, they hesitated. The galaxy's prey had hurt them badly. That hesitation bought 2 more days. Day 6, 89% evacuated. Final transports were loading. 600 million Velterans remained on the surface. Captain Junho watched the last city empty and felt something close to hope. Then sensors detected Voidborn movement. They had found a way around the human fleet. They were making a direct run for Velthar Prime. 4 hours until they reached the planet, the tactical officer reported. Evacuation requires 6 hours minimum. Admiral Sora made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered the Dauntless and 17 other capital ships to descend into Velthar Prime's atmosphere. "Admiral, capital ships can't operate in atmosphere," her first officer said quietly. "We'll never be able to leave the planet's gravity." "I know," Sora said. "That's acceptable. Position us between the spaceports and the incoming Voidborn. We're going to be their shield." The massive warships descended through clouds, their hulls screaming protest at atmospheric entry. They were never designed for this. They settled into positions around the remaining spaceports, their weapons pointed skyward. On the ground, Junho saw the Dauntless overhead and understood immediately. Those ships were never leaving. Everyone aboard them had just volunteered to die. The Voidborn reached atmosphere 2 hours later. They descended like falling darkness. The capital ships opened fire with everything they had. For 2 hours and 43 minutes, 18 human capital ships held the line. Their shields failed. Their hulls cracked, systems overloaded, crew compartments lost pressure, but they kept firing, kept standing between the Voidborn and the people below. Admiral Sora stood on the bridge as systems failed around her. Through the view screen, she could see the last transport lifting off from the spaceport below. The evacuation was complete. "All Veltarans are clear," her communications officer reported, his voice calm despite the flames spreading through the bridge. "Every single person has been evacuated." Sora nodded. "Transmit final message. All hands, it's been an honor. Junho, get your people off the surface now." She looked at her crew one last time. They were still at their stations, still doing their jobs even though they knew what was coming. Evacuation complete. Velthar Prime is clear. 12 years had passed since the Battle of Velthar Prime. The war against the Voidborn continued, but the galaxy had changed in ways nobody expected. Admiral Junho Park, promoted after his survival of the evacuation, stood in the command center watching fleet movements across multiple star systems. The humans weren't fighting alone anymore. "Korvax's ships are reporting ready," his communications officer said. "Drine Empire forces are in position. We have 17 different species coordinating with our battle plan." Junho still found it strange. Before Velthar Prime, most species barely acknowledged humanity. Now they volunteered to serve under human command. The galaxy had learned something that day 12 years ago, something that changed how everyone thought about war and sacrifice. On New Velthar, the world where the Veltarans had resettled, Elder Keeper Silmara walked through the Garden of Names. She was old now. Her colors faded with age, but her memory was as sharp as ever. The garden stretched for miles, filled with trees and flowers and glowing fungi that lit up the paths at night. Every living thing in this garden carried a name. Encoded in the genetic structure of each plant was the identity of a human who had died at Velthar Prime. 47,000 trees for 47,000 military personnel. 6,200 flowering vines for the civilian volunteers. 2,847 unique bioluminescent fungi that spelled out ship names when they glowed. Silmara stopped at a massive tree near the garden's center. Its trunk was thick and strong, its branches spread wide to provide shade. Encoded in its DNA was a name, Admiral Sorahan, commander of the Dauntless. "Hello, old friend," Silmara said quietly. "I come to visit you often. I hope you don't mind." A young Veltaran approached, perhaps 20 years old. Her name was Thil Sora, named after the ancestor who had been saved by Captain Doyon so long ago. She was Silmara's great-granddaughter. "Grandmother, the human delegation has arrived. They want to present the garden to the Galactic Council." Silmara touched the tree trunk gently. Yes, it's time the galaxy remembered properly. The Galactic Council chamber was crowded. Representatives from every major species attended, along with dozens of minor ones. The war against the Voidborn had forced cooperation, but old habits of calculation and self-interest remained strong. Chancellor Minseo Kwan stood at the human delegation area. She was young for a chancellor, only 42, but she had proven herself skilled at galactic politics. Behind her, Ambassador Heejin Song carried the documents for today's presentation. Elder Keeper Silmara approached the speaking platform slowly. At 93 years old, she moved carefully, but her voice remained strong. The chamber quieted to hear her. "Honored Council, I come before you not to ask for anything, but to give something. 12 years ago, humanity did something the galaxy said was impossible. They saved all 6.7 billion of my people, when every calculation said it couldn't be done. They lost 47,000 military personnel. 6,200 civilians volunteered their ships and died. 2,847 vessels were destroyed. She activated a holographic display. The Garden of Names appeared, rotating slowly so everyone could see its scope and beauty. My people are artists and keepers of memory. For 12 years we have worked to create something worthy of what was done for us. We call it the Garden of Names. Every plant, every tree, every living thing is bioengineered to live for 10,000 years. Encoded in each one is the name of a human who fell at Velthar Prime. The chamber was absolutely silent. The hologram showed trees stretching to the horizon, vines covering hillsides, fungi lighting paths through the darkness. We want the galaxy to remember, Silmara continued, her voice breaking slightly. We want our children's children's children 10,000 years from now to walk among these trees and know what was done. We want them to understand that when we were deemed expendable, humanity disagreed. She turned to look at the council members directly. For 3,000 years my people have traveled the stars. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have witnessed countless wars and treaties. We have recorded history that spans millennia. And in all that time across all those civilizations we have never seen anything like what humanity did. Silmara's colors shifted through a pattern that showed deep emotion and absolute certainty. They showed us what civilization truly means. Not economics, not strategy, not military power, but the simple decision that some things are worth everything, that some debts transcend calculation, that saving people who cannot repay you is not inefficiency, but the highest form of wisdom. She bowed to the council and returned to her seat. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment. The council leader stood. The Velthara's tribute is noted and honored. The garden will stand as a monument to an extraordinary act. Chancellor Minseo rose. If I may speak, council leader. Proceed, Chancellor. The Veltharans have created something beautiful and permanent. But the real monument is what happened after Velthar Prime. The galaxy changed. Species that had coexisted for millennia without true cooperation suddenly understood what it means to stand together. She gestured to the delegates around the chamber. In the 12 years since Velthar Prime, 89 species have sent forces to fight alongside humanity against the Voidborn. The Korvaxi Collective, neutral for 2,000 years, now has 800 warships in joint operations. The Drine Empire opened their shipyards to build human-designed vessels. We're pushing the Voidborn back, system by system, because the galaxy learned to work together. Ambassador Heejin activated another display. We're submitting a formal proposal. We call it the Velthar Doctrine. In brief, no species shall be abandoned due to lack of strategic value. Not ever, not for any reason. Every sapient life has worth that transcends calculation. The debate that followed lasted for days. Many species supported the doctrine. Others argued it was impractical and would lead to unsustainable resource allocation. The discussions became heated, with delegates citing economic models and military projections. Finally, the vote came. The Velthar Doctrine was adopted by a slim majority. It wasn't perfect. It had exceptions and conditions. It would be tested and challenged. But it existed. That was something. On Earth, memorials continued to grow. The Wall of Names in Geneva listed every person who had died at Velthar Prime. Families came to place flowers and touch the carved letters. Schools taught the battle as part of required history. Children learned Admiral Sora's final words. Evacuation complete. Velthar Prime is clear. It was an honor. But perhaps the most significant change was quieter. 17 species had established what they called favor pacts with humanity. These were mutual defense agreements based not on strategic interest, but on the principle of reciprocal aid. If you helped someone in need, others would help you. The galaxy was slowly learning to operate on trust instead of calculation alone. Admiral Junho stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing the latest battle reports. The Voidborn had been pushed back to the outer rim. The war wasn't over, but it was winnable now. Cooperation had achieved what individual species never could. His communications officer approached. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from the Velthara. They want to know if you'll attend the Garden of Names dedication ceremony. Junho smiled. Tell them yes, and ask if I can bring some friends. There are 12,000 special operations veterans who'd like to see what we fought for. 3 weeks later, Junho walked through the Garden of Names with his old team. They moved quietly among the trees, reading names encoded in the trunks. Many found the trees of friends who hadn't made it home. A young Velteran girl approached them. She was perhaps 10 years old, her colors bright and curious. "Are you the humans who saved us?" One of Junho's team members knelt down. "We're some of them, yes. My grandmother says you came when no one else would. She says the great powers told us we didn't matter enough to save. But you disagreed. Your grandmother is right." The girl looked up at the massive tree dedicated to Admiral Sora. "Did it hurt when they died for us?" The veteran was quiet for a moment. "Yes, it hurt very much. We lost friends and shipmates, people we loved, but we'd do it again. That's what it means to be human." What does it mean to be human? It means remembering that every life matters. It means keeping promises even when they're hard. It means standing up when someone needs help, even if they can't pay you back. The girl's colors shifted to deep blue, showing understanding and respect. "Thank you for saving my family. Thank you for saving everyone." As the sun set over New Velthar, the bioluminescent fungi began to glow. 2,847 ship names lit up across the garden, spelling out a monument in living light. The humans stood among the trees, remembering fallen friends, watching the Veltharans they had saved living full lives. Chancellor Minseo gave a speech at the dedication ceremony. She spoke about sacrifice and memory and the cost of doing what's right, but her final words were the simplest. 149 years ago, Captain Doyon Kim stopped his ship to save 247 strangers. He couldn't have known that small act would save billions. He couldn't have predicted that humanity's response would change the galaxy. He just knew people needed help and he could provide it. 23 years after the Battle of Velthar Prime, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. The void-born threat had been contained, pushed back to the outer edges where constant patrols kept them from advancing. The war would never truly end, but it had become manageable. The galaxy could breathe again. On Earth, in the city of Seoul, an old woman sat in a care facility watching the news. Her name was Somin, and she was the daughter of Captain Doyon Kim. She was 91 years old now, and her father had been gone for 40 years, but she still remembered his stories about the Velteran rescue. The news showed Ambassador Heejin at a council meeting. The topic was trade agreements, nothing exciting. But Somin watched anyway because it reminded her of her father. He had taught her that small things mattered. Boring meetings mattered. The everyday work of treating people decently mattered just as much as dramatic rescues. A nurse came to check on her. "Ms. Somin, you have a visitor. She's traveled very far to see you." An elderly Velteran entered the room. Her colors were faded with age, but her large eyes were still bright with intelligence. "Hello, Captain Kim's daughter. My name is Thilsora. I am the great-great-granddaughter of Thilmara, who your father saved 160 years ago." Somin smiled. "Please sit down. You've come a long way." Thilsora settled into a chair, her movements careful with age. "I wanted to meet you before I die. Your father saved my ancestor. Because of him I exist. My children exist. My grandchildren exist. 6.7 billion of my people exist because humanity remembered a debt. My father would say he was just doing his job. Yes. The Velterans who knew him said the same thing. He was uncomfortable with gratitude. He thought helping people was normal, not heroic." Thilsora's colors shifted to show amusement, but that's what made it heroic. He didn't see himself as special for doing the right thing. They talked for hours. Thilsora told stories passed down through her family. Somin shared memories of her father. Two old women from different species, connected by events that happened before either was born. When Thilsora finally stood to leave, she placed both hands on Somin's shoulders. "Your father started something that changed the galaxy. He couldn't have known it at the time, but his choice to help strangers created ripples that are still spreading." "What kind of ripples?" "Everything that happened at Velthar Prime, the favor pacts between species, the Velthar Doctrine, the way the galaxy works together now instead of everyone calculating only their own benefit. It all traces back to one captain who stopped when no one else would." After Thilsora left, Somin sat alone, thinking about her father. She remembered him as a quiet man who loved the ocean and didn't like attention. He had died never knowing what his rescue of 247 Velterans would eventually mean. Maybe that was appropriate. He hadn't rescued them for recognition. He had done it because people needed help. On New Velthar, the Garden of Names had become a pilgrimage site. Beings from hundreds of species visited each year, walking among the trees, reading the names encoded in living wood. The garden was maintained by volunteers, both Veltaran and others. It had become a symbol of something larger than one battle or one sacrifice. Young Veltarans grew up playing among the trees, learning the stories of each name. They knew Admiral Sorahan and her final words. They knew Fleet Admiral Tajan in the 14 hours he bought. They knew the names of civilians who had volunteered their ships. Every Veltaran child could recite at least 10 names from memory. In the Galactic Council, the Velthar Doctrine was tested regularly. Not every test succeeded. Politics and self-interest still drove many decisions. But the principle existed now, and that changed debates. When someone suggested abandoning a species due to lack of strategic value, others could point to Velthar Prime and ask, "Are we better than humans? Can we claim to be civilized if we make choices humanity rejected?" It didn't always work, but sometimes it did, and that was progress. The military academies of dozens of species now taught the Battle of Velthar Prime as a case study, not just the tactics, though those were studied extensively, but the decision-making, the moment when humanity chose honor over efficiency, the calculations that said saving the Velthara was impossible, and humanity's response to do it anyway. Future officers learned that some mathematics mattered more than others. That crew morale, that trust between allies, that reputation for keeping promises, these were resources too. They couldn't be easily measured, but they were real. Admiral Junho Park, now retired, spent his time writing a book about the evacuation. He interviewed every surviving veteran he could find, collecting their stories before they were lost. His book wasn't about glory or heroism. It was about the small moments. The engineer who worked 36 hours straight keeping transport ships running. The medical officer who treated Veltaran injuries despite never having studied their biology. The pilot who made 47 trips planetside in 4 days. The book became required reading in many schools. Students learned that history wasn't just made by admirals and politicians. It was made by ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things. On Earth, the memorial wall had expanded. It now included names from other battles, other sacrifices. But the Velthar Prime section remained the largest, and it received the most visitors. Families still came to trace names with their fingers. Children learned about ancestors who had chosen to stand between darkness and billions of strangers. The cultural impact ran deeper than monuments and books. Humanity had proven something at Velthar Prime, and other species had taken notice. When humans gave their word, they kept it. When they made promises, they delivered. When they incurred a debt, they repaid it beyond all reasonable measure. This reputation became valuable in ways that were hard to quantify. Trade negotiations went smoother because human partners were trusted. Alliance offers were taken seriously because humans had proven they would honor commitments even at terrible cost. Military coalitions wanted human participation not just for their ships, but for the certainty that those ships wouldn't abandon the fight. Chancellor Minseo, near the end of her final term, gave a speech reflecting on the past 2 decades. She stood before a joint session of human and allied species representatives. When I was young, I studied the Battle of Velthar Prime in school. Like everyone, I learned the numbers. 47,000 military dead, 6,200 civilian volunteers lost, 2,847 ships destroyed, 6.7 billion saved. She paused, looking across the assembled beings. But numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is that humanity faced a choice between practical survival and impractical honor. We chose honor, and that choice inspired others to do the same. Today, the galaxy is stronger because species work together. We have favor pacts and mutual defense agreements based on trust. We have the Velthar Doctrine, imperfect but existing. We have younger generations growing up believing that cooperation is normal, not exceptional. None of this was inevitable. It happened because Captain Doyen Kim stopped to help strangers 160 years ago. It happened because humanity remembered that debt and repaid it in ways that shocked everyone. Small acts of kindness echo across centuries. Absolute commitment to honor inspires others. And sometimes doing the impossible becomes the foundation for a better future. On New Velthar, in the Garden of Names, a young Veltaran girl named Sora, after the Admiral, asked her grandmother a question. Why do we spend so much time remembering? Why does every child learn these names? The battle was almost a generation ago. Her grandmother, Elder Keeper Silmara's successor, knelt beside her. Because memory is how we honor debts we can never repay. Because these humans died for people they'd never met. Because your existence and mine and everyone on this world, we all exist because strangers chose to sacrifice everything. But they're gone now. How does remembering help them? It doesn't help them. It helps us. It reminds us what we owe. Not to the humans, they don't want payment, but to the universe. We remember so that when we see someone in need, we'll stop. We'll help. We'll be worthy of what was done for us. The girl looked up at the massive tree dedicated to Admiral Sora Han. Its branches spread wide, providing shade for dozens of smaller plants. When I grow up, I want to be like her. Then be brave. Be kind, be willing to sacrifice for others. That's what she was. That's what all these names represent. As the sun set, the bioluminescent fungi began their evening glow. 2,847 ship names lit up the paths through the garden. Families walked among the lights, talking in quiet voices, remembering. Far away in human space, similar remembrances were happening. Veterans gathered at memorials. Families shared stories. Teachers explained to new students why this battle mattered so much. The galaxy had been fundamentally changed by one simple principle. Humanity does not forget a favor and repays it in ways that shock everyone. Not because humans are perfect, not because they're stronger or smarter than other species, but because they had learned somewhere in their difficult history that some things matter more than survival. That honor and decency and keeping promises, these are what make life worth living. The Garden of Names would stand for 10,000 years.